Welcome back to Inklings Behind the Scenes. My name is Cody Lawhorn. I am one of the producers and the head writer on Inklings. Today is a writer's room takeover, and that is for a very exciting reason. A huge congratulations goes out to Jesse and his wife and their family. Within the past few days, Jesse's wife gave birth to their son. If you've been following along with us for a while now, you'll know that Jesse and his wife have been expecting. Jesse's been very excited and eagerly awaiting the arrival of his son. So while they are getting used to life as parents of a newborn, I thought I would step in and kind of take over the episode today and bring you into the writer's room. Before we get started, I just want to give a huge congratulations to Jesse. I have known Jesse for about 13 years now, and I know that Jesse's got a few really big dreams, and one of those has been to create a hit animated kids TV show. And another dream of his that I know that he didn't always mention very much. But when he did, he always mentioned it with, lots of conviction. Jesse has always wanted to be a father. So I am so happy for my dear friend that he's achieved one of his dreams and creating a family for himself. And just huge congratulations to Jesse. I know you've been wanting to be a dad for a very long time, and you're going to be a great father. So that being said, we are going to celebrate by having some fun in the writer's room today. We are going to do a few things. We're going to make a little list here of our agenda. Thing number one is we are going to discuss the differences between procedural and episodic television and provide some examples of that. The second thing I want to do is I'm going to call it Inklings as Is. And that is where I kind of share with all of you, the wonderful growing community that we have, kind of what Jesse and I originally envisioned for the show and the types of storylines that we had in mind. And kind of the status of where we were compared to where we are now. And how the show has evolved. And the types, and we'll probably be going into maybe some of the types of sketches that we have in mind. But then the last thing that I want to do after Inklings as is the third and final thing, which is elements of the library. We are going to have an actual brainstorming session together where we write down elements of the library. These could be things you would see when you go into a library, things people are doing, maybe visual objects we might see, things we might hear. And we're going to take all of these elements and we'll call that a day after that point. But then as we continue on, we're going to take the ingredients that we started with today, from thing number one, procedural versus episodic, 2, Inklings as Is, and 3, our brainstorming session, our elements of the library. And then we're going to add some of our characters into the mix next time. And then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of mix and match and see what type of fun, charming, endearing storylines we can come up with. But all of this will come together within the next few episodes of the Writer's Room. All right, that being said, I'd like to get started. Okay, so item number 1 on our agenda today, procedural versus episodic. What is procedural versus episodic? Well, these are types of stories. Let me correct myself. These are types of storytelling. 2 types of visual storytelling. Procedural is a cartoon or a movie, a film, where the story follows a procedure, where every episode, I wouldn't say that the same thing occurs, but there's a procedure, there's an order to things, where they do kind of the same thing every episode, but involving different characters. I'm trying to think of a good example of procedural cartoons. And there's two examples that come to mind. For those of you most of you are familiar with Looney Tunes. Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner is an example of procedural cartoons, procedural storytelling. Every episode, the coyote tries to catch the Roadrunner, and every episode he fails, and he just fails in funny ways. Another example of procedural cartoons, and I should probably go back. There's a lot of other cartoons within within Looney Tunes that are also procedural. Most of them with Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, or I'm sorry, Donald Duck. That's Disney. I'm sorry, I meant to say Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck, or Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny, where he's trying to, or he's hunting wascally wabbits. That is also procedural. The other really good example of procedural cartoons that I can think of is Scooby-Doo. There's always a mystery that needs to be solved, right? There's always a villain, a monster, and there's always someone behind that monster that Scooby and the gang need to catch every episode. I think Scooby-Doo is probably the best example of true procedural cartoons that I can think of. I could argue that there are some Looney Tunes that are episodic, and episodic is where you have a story that builds, where not every episode is the same. Obviously, there will be a beginning, a middle, and an end. There will be a problem that the characters need to solve. But episodic is more so where the story builds on each other. Now, I could argue that there are episodes of Looney Tunes where Bugs Bunny goes to Transylvania and he meets Dracula, or some of the episodes with Marvin the Martian, or Hansel and Gretel and the Witch, or when Daffy Duck finds the magic lamp and finds the genie. You could argue that some of those mini episodes of Looney Tunes are episodic. However, I feel that three excellent examples of episodic cartoons would be Disney's The Gargoyles from the 90s. And I say that because every episode built upon the episodes you saw prior, and it created a bigger story, a bigger story that evolved over quite a few seasons. Another example of episodic cartoons and episodic storytelling would also be two cartoons from the 90s. There's The Amazing Spider-Man, and then also X-Men. These cartoons were episodic. There was not one evil villain in every cartoon, and they didn't do the same thing. There were different situations that the characters encountered in every episode, and it told a story, a bigger, more epic, longer story. And so those are the examples of episodic television that I can think of. Okay, moving on, we are going to talk about Inklings as is. So, Inklings as is. Real quick, we're going to make this section really short. And that's because Inklings as is, the original thought was that Inklings was going to consist of 20-minute episodes, and they were going to be episodic, meaning that the bugs would go on an adventure in every episode. They would dive in and act out scenes from their favorite books. Sometimes they would get in shenanigans around the library. But mostly they were really diving and acting out the stories and the tales from all the classic novels and literature on the short list that Jesse and I had. And that short list consisted of Treasure Island, Moby Dick, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There were tons of classic stories of classic literature that the bugs were going to dive into. And then we thought that, some episodes, with Treasure Island, if every episode is 20 minutes, we could stretch that out to 3 episodes maybe. But we've recently decided that Inklings is going to be more like the Animaniacs, where it's a variety show, where there are different sets of characters doing different things. Some of them always have the same goal, some of them have different goals, but there are going to be different sketches, different bits, and I'm very excited for that, because although I love the style of episodic storytelling, I feel that utilizing both procedural elements, where there are Inkling sketches where there's a bug that does one particular thing in every episode, and it is a procedural style, the variety show change to Inklings that Jesse and I established will give us more freedom, more creative freedom, and more creative freedom for when we include other writers further down the line. People can create episodic stories, or we could create procedural stories. So it really just gives us more breathing room when we get into the creative process. Okay. As far as I think that fairly covers Inklings as is. Jesse and I have discussed a few different variations of acts that we want to see in Inklings, but I think we're going to keep those under our hat for now. We will introduce those and share those with you in due time, but I really think it would be fun for us to come up with and create some brainstorming ideas together. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the last thing on our list today is our brainstorming session. This is called Elements of the Library. Okay, Elements of the Library. I'm going to be writing this out with you as we go. Let's start with things people do in the library, or things we might see. We might see. Okay, so there are people checking in books, checking in, people checking out, people checking out. Then what other things might see people reading? Reading. Maybe we'll see people writing, handwritten or typewriter. Well, that used to be a long time ago. Typewriter, or we could just write writing. What else might we see in the library? So we have people checking books in, checking books out, people reading. We might hear people writing, might hear people typing. What else? elements of the library. Okay, let's talk about, let's start naming some physical objects. So we've obviously got books. Librarians, when I was younger, I know most things are electronic today in libraries, but librarians used to have a stamp where they would turn the dials on it, and it would adjust the rubber stamp with the numbers on it that showed the due date of your book. I'm dating myself here because I know everything's electronic now. But I'm going to write stamps on this list. So we have books, stamps. There might be computers in the library. Trying to think of other things we might see in the library. We've got books, stamps, computers. There's obviously tables and chairs. Tables, chairs, we'll put those on one line. I want to say every library is going to have decorations or art. Yeah, decorations, art. I'd say there's a safe bet that there's going to be plants in the library. There's got to be at least a couple plants in a library. You know, these things, they may seem small, they may seem a little boring, but I think what you'll find later is that even if something seems as boring as like a stamp or like a plant in a library, you know, there's potential for comedy in any situation. And that is what we're trying to find here. Okay, so we've got a short list going of elements in the library. We've got things we might see, people checking in books, people checking out books, people reading, people writing, either handwritten or at a typewriter or a computer. Things we might see, other things we might see, physical objects. We've got books, we've got stamps, computers, tables, chairs, decorations or art. We've got plants. Sometimes the tough part is really just sitting down and thinking of these things. Obviously there's bookshelves. Gotta put that in there. Bookshelves. Okay, now let's talk about other elements of the library. There's an organizational system. We're going to put this kind of off to the side here. Organization. And then we're going to do a little subcategory, the Dewey Decimal System. For those of you, most of you might know what the Dewey Decimal System is. We're gonna put that on our list. What else? Organization, Dewey Decimal System. What other things? You have to be quiet in a library. I'm gonna just write this. How about right here? Gotta be quiet. Be quiet. Well, we're gonna put quiet and courteous. All right. Okay, so I think this is a really good start for today. We've talked about the differences between procedural and episodic storytelling. We've discussed a few examples of those. We've kind of touched the surface of Inklings as is, and touched on how the original vision has evolved in my eyes and through Jesse's eyes as well. And we've started to scratch the surface of elements of the library by listing things we might see people doing, objects we might see, kind of expectations and like kind of what's in the what the atmosphere is, obviously organization, and being as far as organization, as far as filing or putting away the books, and then also a little bit about the atmosphere, people needing to be quiet and courteous. This may not seem very exciting right now, but I promise you, as we put these pieces together, you'll see how they all fit in together and how we are going to craft something that could be funny. It could fall flat. We may have to, we're tossing spaghetti at the wall here and we're seeing what sticks. So I would like to thank all of you and our wonderful growing community for putting up with me this episode. I know this episode hasn't been very visually striking. I love watching Jesse really show all of you the process of creating the characters and setting up all the character rigs. I find that really fascinating as far as animation goes. And I know this episode can be a little visually mundane and boring, but I appreciate all of you sticking with me as I was basically a talking head today. And we're going to have a lot more fun in the future. Again, thank you so much to all of you. Jesse and I are so incredibly humbled that you are following us on our journey to create a hit kids TV show. And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Again, a big congrats to Jesse and his family. He will be back soon. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and thank you for listening.